In the vast pages of history, few names echo with the power, defiance, and courage of Spartacus. He was not born a king, nor did he inherit the power of empires. He was a man chained, forced into the brutal life of a gladiator, fighting for the amusement of others. Yet within him burned a fire no chain could hold, a spirit too fierce for submission. Spartacus was not merely a fighter. He was a voice for the voiceless, a dreamer of freedom in an age ruled by tyranny. At a time when Rome stood invincible, he dared to defy it. Gathering men and women who shared his pain, he forged an army from those the world had forgotten. Each battle he fought was more than a clash of swords. It was a cry for justice, a plea for humanity. Though his rebellion was ultimately crushed, his name never faded into silence. Instead, it became a banner of hope for all who dared to rise against chains, reminding the world that even the lowest among men can stand taller than empires when driven by the pursuit of freedom. Spartacus's story is not merely about war. It is about the strength of conviction, the fire of liberty, and the enduring truth that one person's courage can awaken the will of thousands. And though his life ended upon a battlefield, his legacy marches still, not as a tale of defeat, but as an eternal lesson that the fight for freedom never truly dies. Spartacus's story begins in the shadows of chains, within a world that viewed human beings as property. Born in Thrace, a region known for its fierce warriors, he was captured and sold into slavery by the very empire he would one day challenge, Rome. His early life remains veiled in mystery, but what we know reveals a man of extraordinary strength, intelligence, and will. As a slave, Spartacus was trained to become a gladiator, a fighter forced to entertain Roman audiences through blood and death. Yet beneath the iron of his armor beat the heart of a man who refused to be broken. His rise from slavery to leadership was not born of ambition, but of a deep yearning for freedom, not only for himself, but for all who suffered under Rome's merciless hand. In the harsh and unforgiving life of the gladiatorial arena, Spartacus learned more than combat. He learned strategy, courage, and unity. Surrounded by men from different lands, all enslaved, he recognized that their greatest strength lay not in their individual might, but in their shared desire for liberation. Rome had trained him to kill, but unknowingly, it had also trained him to lead. Each strike he made in the arena became a lesson, each victory a spark of defiance. To survive was to resist. To resist was to dream of a day when no man would bow to the chains of another. His rise from a captive fighter to a leader of men is one of history's most inspiring transformations. Spartacus's courage was not the blind bravery of a warrior, but the clear vision of a man who understood the worth of freedom. He was not content to merely escape. He sought to lift others with him. In a world where slaves were denied identity, he gave them purpose. He spoke to their pain, to their buried hopes, and to the silent rage that had long been caged within them. Through his words and actions, he became more than a man. He became a symbol, a living reminder that even those crushed beneath the weight of empire could rise again. The journey of Spartacus reminds us that greatness often emerges from suffering. He was not shaped by privilege, but by struggle. Each scar on his body carried a story of endurance, of loss, of defiance. His rise from the lowest ranks of society to the command of a revolutionary army stands as proof that true leadership is born not from birthright but from conviction. Spartacus showed the world that no empire, however mighty, can forever silence the human spirit when it longs to be free. When Spartacus escaped from the gladiatorial school in Capua, he did not flee alone. Alongside a small band of fellow gladiators, armed with little more than kitchen knives and stolen weapons, he made his first stand against Rome. What began as a desperate flight soon transformed into one of the most remarkable uprisings in ancient history. Word spread quickly across Italy. The slaves were rising. From distant farms, quarries, and mines, men and women abandoned their masters to join Spartacus. Within months, his small group of fugitives grew into a vast force numbering tens of thousands. They were not trained soldiers, but people bound by a common dream, the dream of freedom. Spartacus, once a captive of Rome, became their leader, not through fear or force, but through trust. His bravery and compassion united them, forging an army out of those the world had cast aside. The gladiators' rebellion shook the foundations of Rome itself. It was not merely a revolt of slaves. It was a rebellion against a system built on cruelty and inequality. Spartacus and his followers defied the legions of one of the most powerful empires on earth, defeating Roman forces time and again. He was not simply fighting battles, he was waging a war for dignity. Under his leadership, the rebel army displayed remarkable discipline and courage, often outsmarting Roman generals who underestimated them. Spartacus understood that their fight was not for conquest, but for survival. He led with vision, urging his people to leave Italy and seek true freedom beyond its borders, away from Rome's reach. But freedom was not easy to claim. Each victory came at a terrible cost. Many of those who followed him had never known life beyond servitude, and for some, vengeance burned brighter than hope. Yet Spartacus tried to hold them together, reminding them that their cause was greater than revenge. It was about reclaiming their humanity. His leadership turned chaos into purpose, and his defiance turned despair into unity. Rome, humiliated by repeated defeats, began to fear the very slaves it had once dismissed as powerless. The Senate dispatched its greatest generals to crush the rebellion. Realizing that Spartacus was no mere fugitive, he was a threat to the very order of the empire. The Gladiators' rebellion stands as one of the boldest acts of defiance in history. It revealed the cracks within Rome's mighty armor, showing that even the most oppressed could challenge the invincible. Spartacus led not just with his sword, but with his vision of freedom, a vision that inspired those around him to believe that chains could be broken. Though surrounded by the might of Rome, he made the world see that even in bondage, the flame of liberty can burn brighter than any empire's glory. Throughout history, Spartacus has stood as a symbol far greater than the man himself. Though his rebellion was crushed and his life taken, his name lived on, echoing through time as a voice for all who dare to resist oppression. His struggle was not simply a revolt against Rome. It was a cry for justice, a declaration that every human being has the right to live free. For centuries, storytellers, philosophers, and revolutionaries have looked to Spartacus as the embodiment of defiance. He became a legend, not because he conquered, but because he refused to bow. His courage reminded the world that true power lies not in armies or wealth, but in the strength of conviction. In every age, his name has reappeared when people have risen against tyranny. From the fields of Europe to the colonies that sought independence, from enslaved nations to silenced voices, Spartacus became a symbol that transcended his own time. He represented the eternal struggle between freedom and domination, between those who rule and those who refuse to be ruled unjustly. Even those who knew little of Rome could understand the story of a man who stood against impossible odds, leading others to hope in a world where none seemed left. In this way, Spartacus's rebellion became more than a historical event. It became a moral compass for generations. What makes his legacy enduring is not victory but sacrifice. Spartacus fought knowing the power of Rome could crush him, yet he chose defiance over submission. That choice gave meaning to his struggle, turning defeat into inspiration. For those who lived under chains, whether literal or symbolic, his name became a whisper of courage. In times of despair, people remembered that once, a slave had made the empire tremble. His example told them that even when justice fails and strength falters, the act of standing up remains the greatest triumph of all. Even the Romans, who once branded him a criminal, could not erase his memory. Centuries later, artists, writers, and leaders across the world revived his story to remind humanity of the price of freedom. To them, Spartacus was not merely a man of war, he was a man of principle. His refusal to surrender became a mirror through which societies saw their own struggles. The oppressed saw hope, the powerful saw warning. That is the power of a symbol. It outlives flesh and blood, turning defeat into destiny. Spartacus, the slave who defied an empire, remains a beacon to all who dream of liberty. His name endures because he represents not just one rebellion, but the unending fight within every human heart to rise, to resist, and to live free.